It's firewood season. That also means it's shillelagh season. All the sap in the tree has gone down into the roots, leaving the tree a little bit drier, and that would leave my shillelaghs a little bit less prone to warping and cracking over the course of the drying process. On the table here, we've got some fresh cut shillelaghs. We've got a couple that have been drying now for a few months with grease over them. And I've got one that I'm working on, the artwork right now, and two here that are finished. When I first cut my shillelaghs, I leave a little bit extra on either end. Whenever a crack does appear, it's generally from the end as the piece is drying. And if you leave yourself a little bit extra, you can sometimes cut off some and get above the crack, and then it gets rid of it for you. After I cut my shillelaghs, I just leave them as they are. I don't do any work to them until they're completely dry. I will take some Vaseline though, coat the entire thing, and that way it makes it dry even slower. The idea is you don't want to get any cracks in your wood, and unfortunately this one here is starting with a little crack down here at the bottom, and I can only think that I started working on it a bit too soon. I could also build a little trough, like a 90-degree angle for these here to rest in while they dry, and that way you could strap it down and you could try to keep your piece of wood from bending. But that's a lot of work when you try to accumulate 20 or 30 of these over time to build all these troughs, so I typically don't bother with it. But if you do want to avoid warping like this here. So the ones that we've cut this year, I'm not going to touch them again after I grease them. I'm going to leave them sit for a year, and then January of 2026 we'll come back on and we'll try a video to show how these ones have cured. At that time we will then begin working the wood to get rid of like knots like this here, and to shape the head of each one, remove all the bark of course. Now what I'm looking for when I'm in the woods cutting my firewood usually are clumps of maple. If I've cut off a maple the prior year, you'll get shoots coming up, and within a few years you may get a piece like this here that's nice and straight and of the right diameter for a shillelagh. In medieval times they used to make what are called quarter staffs, and my understanding was that was literally the quarter of a tree lathed down into a nice straight piece that you could use as a staff. I don't bother with any of that. I just look for really nice straight pieces of maple, shoots that would have the core on through the rings right out to the edge here. So it's basically a full tree. My choice of wood in eastern Canada here is maple, primarily red maple. I just don't have access to a lot of sugar or rock maple. That would be preferable, where it has a hardness of about 1450 on the Janka wood hardness scale. Red maple is considered a soft maple, and it has a hardness of around 950, which is still respectable. But you know, the hardest wood in Canada is ironwood, and it has a score of over 3000 on that scale. Some of the softest wood in my forest would be poplar, and that's down around 450. Interestingly enough, I couldn't find any data on blackthorn, which is the traditional wood used in Ireland to make these. All I could find was that it is a hard, like dense wood and quite strong and heavy, but I don't actually know anything on where it would sit on that scale. So maple's pretty tough. Even the red maple, I find it's quite durable and strong and shock resistant and easy to work with. It's got a lot of nice qualities for a shillelagh. We're going to put grease on these newly cut ones and set them aside for a year. We'll come back in January 2026 and see how they're doing, and finish the process of taking the bark off them, shaping them, and making a shillelagh of them. These ones here we should be able to get in about 9 months. This one we're going to finish off the artwork, and then we're going to try fire hardening it. I've never tried this before, but I'm hoping to make it even lighter and stronger, and then apply our final coat of tung oil, and we'll show the end result. The stick has been drying for a good year, and I've got it sanded all down, and I've got my artwork done on it. We're going to try to further fire harden it to see if we can actually increase the hardness of the stick. So we've got our kindling. We're going to make a TP fire. And I don't want to take my stick and put it over open flames and have it burn where I've already done my artwork. And so we've just got to do this fire hardening over a bed of really hot coals today. I don't really have a scientific way to tell if we actually do improve somehow the hardness of the wood after our process here today, but I do have an old kitchen scale, and I've weighed this once already. It came to 0.445 kilograms, so that's where we're at. 0.444 we'll say. After our process today, we'll weigh it again and see if it actually takes any weight of moisture out of the wood. Okay, we got a decent bed of coals down there. We're just going to start today kind of slow roasting this thing over the fire. Okay, I'm seeing steam come off of it now. I don't want to overdo the ends here, because that's most likely where a split would occur at this point. So we're going to push it out past the end, and then just keep slowly rotating this over the fire. Noticing moisture escaping from the knots quite a bit. Birch bark is a great way to increase the temperature quickly in here. It's got a lot of oils in it, but I've got to wait for these flames now to burn out again. It's cold outside today, and I don't want the wood itself here to cool down, so I'm just keeping it here. That'll be burned off in another maybe 60 seconds, and then I can go back to putting this right over the pit. It's hard to hold on to now, it's this hot up here. Preparing my stove for fire hardening today. To get this really hot, we're going to add a new piece of maple in there, and then we're going to turn up the draft, and we're going to let this thing burn off for a little while at a really high temperature until we're down to a low enough amount of ash that I can put my shillelagh in here. Okay, we're at the last step of the fire hardening process. Over here we have our tung oil and a rag soaking in it, ready to go, so that as soon as our shillelagh comes out of the wood stove, while it's really hot, we're going to hit it with the tung oil to finish this thing off, and that should help it to really penetrate into the wood. I've got a bed of really hot ashes in here. We're going to rake these out so that they're nice and level, because the shillelagh has to go all the way to the back of the stove and turn. I want it hot enough to really take the moisture out of this quickly, but not so hot that it catches on fire or burns the stick any. So the wood has yet to cool off. Let's start with the bottom end. Ooh, and it's darkening the wood. That wood's boiling hot, and my thumb just touched it. That's some of my crappy gloves. One more pass. Oh, that's hot. There, it's smoking hot. The tung oil now is to get the moisture back into the wood before it splits any. And that's going to finish this off. You want a lot up around your ends. This end, you see, we're going to have to cut off a little bit because of this crack down here. That's been there for a long time though and hasn't really spread much further, so we should be able to get up above it and still maintain most of our length. And besides that, this was still a raw cut from when I originally cut it, and it's on a little bit of an angle, so it needed to be straightened out regardless. After this, we're just going to set this aside and let it dry for a day, lightly sand it, and then put on one more layer of tung oil. So there it is. We dropped from decimal 444 kilograms to decimal 407 kilograms. Shaved actually quite a bit of weight off of this. This gives an idea of the amount of work involved in making a shillelagh. They won't be cheap therefore, but if anybody's interested in a walking stick, shillelagh, or war club, leave it in the comments and something can be arranged. And on an upcoming video, we may cover our two-handed fighting style with the shillelagh. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel.